There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Well, here I am with another, in other words, it's been a minute. I haven't done one of these for months. I just kind of got away from doing these. I've been keeping notes on all the words I've been encountering in my reading, but I haven't made one of these videos. The coronavirus pandemic kind of waylaid a lot of things that were regular features of my life and my BookTube life. And I also, because of the pandemic, everybody and their dog, including me, started doing Zoom chat videos on BookTube, and I did too. So that has become a focus, but I love doing these, so I am finally back. So for those of you new to my channel in the last 6 months or something, you have no idea what In Other Words is, and what it is an occasional series where I talk about the vocabulary, grammatical patterns, idioms, and so on that I encounter in my reading. And as I like to clarify, every so often, I am by no means an expert. I am not an etymologist. I am not a linguist. But basically what I do is when I find words in books that I don't know, I love to do a deep dive on Google, etymological dictionaries and whatnot. And when I find stuff that's interesting, I make a video about it. So here I am. And also like to occasionally remind you, do check out the comment sections, because often I get corrected or people have supplemental information, and the comment section is always fabulous, usually fabulous. On these particular videos, it's maybe the best part of the whole experience. That being said, let's get started. 6 pieces of vocabulary today, and the first 3 are from Shuggie Bain, which I will probably finish up this weekend. I will have finished the book long before you see this video, but I am on the last 100 pages or so. The Scottish debut novel by Douglas Stewart that I'm absolutely loving. It's quite possibly going to be my book of the year. And lots of great vocabulary, Scots words and Scottish English slang and so on. So I've got a few of those for you to get started. The first one is Patter. The main character, Agnes's husband, Shuggie Bain, is described early in the book as having the Glasgow patter. And patter, I kind of had to remind myself, but the original meaning of the verb patter was a quick succession of small taps. Pat, pat, pat. So the word pat also comes from that. And then kind of evolved into just being a quick succession of small sounds. The patter of little feet, common expression. That phrase was sometimes used to refer to the expectation of a new baby. And there's apparently a famous poem, The Patter of Little Feet. So pat, 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 pat. Etymologists are reluctant to make a clear connection between that sound tapping meaning and the other meaning that grew up, which meant glib, rapid chatter. But I think it's obvious that that would come out of it. However, let's kind of circle around. Before we move on to the second, more idiomatic meaning of the verb patter, let's take this first meaning of patter and go back to the noun pat, which entered English in around the year 1400, meaning a blow or stroke, and was perhaps imitative of the sound. And that evolved into a light tap with the hand, pat somebody on the back, pat someone on the shoulder, by around 1800. Which by the late 16th century came to mean as an adjective a pat comment, a pat remark, something that was apt, suitable for the time. Hitting the mark, so blow, stroke, and then a pat answer. Pat answer, I think, in modern parlance is pejorative, but I guess in the late 16th century it meant apropos. It was the perfect comment, suitable. And then we get the verb pat, which we've talked about. So all of that in the background, let's move on to the talking meaning of patter. Glib talk, rapid chattering, which came into English in the mid-15th century, that etymologists are reluctant to link the two meanings of the verb. So, to talk glibly, to chatter rapidly, patter, the second meaning. Comes from the Middle English patterin, which meant to mumble prayers rapidly, late 14th century, which is a shortened form of paternoster, which is the Lord's Prayer, right? Paternoster. which went back to Latin our Father. So all the paternity, all of the word family for father. But the glib talk came from the mumbling form of the Lord's Prayer. Mumble, mumble, mumble. A low, indistinct repetition of the prayer in churches. Patter. So they think it's probably influenced by the first verb patter, but because it goes so clearly into paternoster, there are people that don't want to be definitive. And as a noun, patter by the late 18th century meant the rough language of thieves and beggars, then the glib or fluent talk of a stage comedian or a salesman. So the salesman glib talk is what the meaning that was used in this Shugibane. A pattercove in the 16th century, a pattercove, all one word, was slang for a strolling priest. Late 18th century, pattering was the pert replies of servants. And apparently, according to this one source from 1896, the paternoster, the Lord's Prayer, it was recited by the priest in a low voice as far as, and lead us not into temptation, at which point the choir joined in. Singing or speaking, I'm not sure. I don't know. Somebody will tell me in the comments below. And the pitter-patter is just one of those rhyming reduplications, meaning the same thing, a rapid repetition of words. Next was an interesting piece of Scottish slang that I have encountered many times so far in the novel Shugibane, which was the slang meaning of greet. Oftentimes somebody is greeting or somebody says stop greeting, and what it means is crying. As we all know in English, German, Dutch, the primary meaning of greet is to salute, introductory kind of salutation. And that goes back to Proto-Germanic, and the Old English verb was gretan. I'll spell that up here. And gretan also in Old English meant weep or bewail. So that is the meaning that still survives in Scottish English and Northern English dialects. They're not exactly sure, but they think also the etymology of the word regret, that the second syllable, G-R-E-T, comes from the same Proto-Germanic root, gretan. They're a little tentative about that, but it makes sense. So yeah, in Scottish English, greeting can also describe crying, or even more modernly, from what I read on the internet, is it true, Nicola, that it can also now mean whinging, complaining. Stop your greeting. So there you go. The last one from Shugibane for this video, and I have lots more I'd like to talk about in future videos, is gallus. I think it's Shug, the father, who's a gruff character indeed. He's described as having a gallus grin. So gallus in Scottish means bold, cheeky, or flashy. So cheeky, I think, is how it's meant in context. And that goes back from Scottish into late Middle English, and it meant fit to be hanged, and it actually comes from the word gallows. But in modern Scottish English, it means self-confident, daring, stylish, impressive. If you trace the shifts in meaning of the Scottish word gallus, it originally meant something a lot more negative, villainous. In a Robert Burns poem, Scotland has been plundered of her hindmost groat by gallows knaves, so villainous. But more recently, maybe by around 1950, it lost a lot of that negative power and became kind of cheeky. A gallus lassie. There's all kinds of other meanings of gallus that you can look up, and apparently nobody thinks they're in any way connected to the Scottish meaning that I have just explained. Next, I have one word from the latest novel by Joyce Carol Oates, Night, Sleep, Death, the Stars, and that is Fontanelle, which is the soft part in a baby's skull, and one of the main characters, the widow of the story, gets caught up on a beautiful reflective passage that's centered around that word, Fontanelle, remembering how vulnerable all of her 5 or 6 children were when they were babies. And she kind of does an interior riff on Fontanelle, so I didn't know what it meant. It's the soft spots of a baby's head before the skull completely connects everything. And before the baby's skull fully connects and hardens, while those soft spots are still there, I'll put some pictures up to show you what it looks like from Wikipedia. The heartbeat of the baby, you can actually apparently feel it or see it. You can see the heart beating through the open parts, the little open parts, and blood flows, and so Fontanelle goes back to fountain. If you didn't know, I didn't know. So this medical baby meaning is the hollow between 2 muscles. The 16th century French word fontanelle goes back to Old French, which meant fountain, spring, going all the way back. And the analogy being the dent in the earth where a spring arises. First recorded for the baby meaning in 1741. I am just getting a bare start on this novel out of Wales, The Jeweller by Carol Lewis, translated from the Welsh by Gwen Davis. I've been reading it for about 10 days and haven't gotten very far in, but I'm really enjoying it. And there was one word that I was curious about. Porkies. The main character tells a man, I'm not far enough in, I think this is her brother, but maybe it's her boyfriend. It's really ambiguous at the beginning of the novel. But he says to her, they're speaking in person, and he says, I'll come over soon, and she says, that's enough porkies. Porkies? What the heck? So porkies is actually, this is Welsh. I mean, it was translated into English, so I don't know if there's what the Welsh word was that got translated into porkies, but in British English, porkies is the fragmentary leftovers from a piece of rhyming Cockney slang. Rhyming Cockney slang is fascinating. Phrases were concocted containing 2 nouns to form some kind of an idiom or metaphor that rhymes with the latter noun in the expression. So, instead of saying stairs in Cockney rhyming slang, they would say apple and pears, and that meant stairs. Instead of saying dead, they would say brown bread. And porky goes back to pork pie, which was Cockney rhyming slang for lie, and it became kind of idiomatically always in the plural, porkies. So she says, that's enough porkies. What she means is, that's enough lies. Stop lying. Porkies. Wow. So please, you Brits, give some of your favorite Cockney rhyming slang and let me know how prevalent it is in modern English. It's really interesting as an outsider. It seems to be always a noun, so I don't think we can use it as a verb, but somebody can clarify that for me too. The last one comes from this historical novel that I've just started, The Tainted by Kovari Madhavan, and it is set in 1920s India, in colonial India. Most of the characters so far are Irish, and the word is scapular. The main character, he has a scapular around his neck, and I wasn't sure what it meant. The key bit being it's over his neck but over his shoulders. So scapula is shoulders, and a scapular is a long, wide band of cloth with an opening for the head, worn over the shoulders as a kind of monastic habit. So this character in the novel, he's not a monk, so that's the original meaning of the item of kind of religious clothing, but a secondary meaning, which is what contextually is being described here, is a pair of small cloth squares joined by shoulder tapes and worn under the clothing on the breast and back as a sacramental. And that's what he's wearing. His sister had died when he was young. She wasn't very old either. And so he's wearing this. It was some kind of religious something or other that she wore, and he wears it in memory of her. A scapular. The other meaning of scapular is it's an adjective that means of or relating to the shoulder. So the scapula is the shoulder blade. The word scapula comes into English in the late 16th century from Latin. And going back to a Proto-Indo-European root, scap, which was a variant of skep. So scap and skep, I'll put those up here. I think in past in other words videos, I shared all the derivations of Proto-Indo-European roots too much, and I'm going to from now on limit myself to one per video. So this is the one, boys and girls, because when you go back and look at all the words we get from skap and going back to the Proto-Indo-European roots, we get scabies. So those Proto-Indo-European roots meant to cut or scrape, and we get the word scrape from one of those closely connected Proto-Indo-European roots. So what's the connection between a shoulder and scrape? They aren't sure, so some etymologists conjecture that it was the shape of the shoulder blade that was like a spade or shovel, but others say no. Probably what it was in primitive times, people used shoulder blades of animals as a scraping tool, but nobody knows for sure. Anyway, keeping all that in mind, it's fascinating to look at some of the other words that are so closely connected, and they're connected through that scraping thing. Scabies, skin disease. You're itching, you're scraping your skin. That goes back to the same Indo-European roots. Scab, same. Scabrous, scoop, shape, and shave. And I think I've just scraped the surface, but that's enough. And I promise there were no porkies in the making of this video. Thanks for watching.